Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends. We're so glad you could attend. Come inside, come inside.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Expat Conversations with your host, Michael Nolen. First of all, I want to say thank you very much to Dr. Marco Antonio Cortez Gradado. He is the former General Rector of the University of Guadalajara and is now in charge of the Institute of Investigation, Innovation, and Governance, which is the part of the university that allows us to have this YouTube program to reach out to the expat community. I want to say thank you very much to Dr. Cortez and all of his group that helps the video group, the audio people, the secretaries, and everything. Also want to say thank you again to the Monte Carlo Hotel, where we're situated at today on the beautiful shores of Lake Chapala here in central Mexico. They are very generous in their time and allowing us to use their facilities. If you're not familiar with the Monte Carlo Hotel, it's a very, very beautiful place. It's situated right on the lake. We have about 100 rooms, conference rooms. One unique thing about this hotel that I haven't seen anywhere else is all the baths and showers have thermal mineral water in them. We also have a big pool here that a lot of people come to and soak in the thermal mineral water. It's very good health-wise. They also have pickleball courts, a great restaurant, and so a very big thank you to the Monte Carlo Hotel here on the main avenue in West Chapala. Today I have a very, very interesting individual. He's a VIP, he's a very important person, but I call him a very interesting person, VIP, Steve Nousen. Steve, thank you very much for your time. I first met Steve probably 6 months ago at the Lake Chapala Society. He was putting on the Open Circle presentation. Open Circle is a series of lectures or talks that the Lake Chapala Society puts on every Sunday at, I believe, 10:30. It's about an hour long and very, very interesting. Every week has a different person or people talking about all kinds of topics and subjects. And Steve, I'm going to let him tell you a little bit more about himself, what he does, about the things that we have here in front, which are props that kind of feed into his second world, second life, second personality, persona. And thank you again for taking the time to come and visit and being on Expat Conversations.
Well, thank you, Michael. It's great to be here and great to be at the Monte Carlo. I have enjoyed my time living here in the Lake Chapala region. I actually came here almost 4 years ago to the day.
Wow.
I came here on my 70th birthday.
So that makes you 74.
That makes me almost 74. Next week.
Sister Irene, my second, third, and fourth grade math classes will be proud that I can still add.
I'll be 74 next week.
Well, happy birthday next week.
Thank
you.
you
A little bit
very
early,
much.
belated. Happy birthday.
I'm delighted to be here to talk a little bit about my alter ego, who is Benjamin Franklin. And Dr. Franklin has taught me a great deal over the years as I've been studying him. And I am a former history teacher. I taught high school history in Oregon for 14 years.
Wow.
And then I went into politics and worked in Washington, D.C., in and around the Senate and on Capitol Hill as a staff member.
Wow.
And
I didn't know that about you.
Well, I was the last chief of staff for Oregon's senior senator, Mark Hatfield, who served for 30 years in the United States Senate. And
short timer.
One of the great human beings I've ever met, and also a wonderful senator, and he had been governor before. So
He must have been a very good representative for the state of Oregon, or he wouldn't have kept getting reelected.
he got reelected because he deserved to be reelected.
Well,
And
is he still alive?
He is not. He passed
Oh.
away in 2011. So, but I was lucky enough to work for him, and then I went to work for the National Education Association, the Teachers Union in Washington, and worked as a lobbyist.
Wow.
But when I was getting ready to retire, I was thinking, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? I was a golfer my whole life. I thought, well, I'll just go play golf every day. And people said, that's not going to work. You got to do something else. And so I sat down and I started making a list of things I really liked to do and things that I didn't care if I ever did again. And I let that list just sit. I'd come back to it every month or so and I'd say, you know, I don't really like to do this one. And I'd cross it off the list. Or over here and say, you know, I can do that. I can force myself to do that and move it over to this side. Little did I know that that's the kind of thing Ben Franklin did.
Oh, really?
And he would do 2 lists of the pros and cons of a particular event and let it sit and go from that particular problem solving. And I had done this, and one day, out of the universe, came my answer. You could become a character to play Benjamin Franklin and take your teaching skills with your knowledge of history and your acting skills, which I always like to do as well.
Well, in Washington, you have to be an actor.
You have to be an actor, and you have to be an actor to hold the attention of 30 high school juniors who are thinking about all other kinds of things when you're 16 years old. So I basically said, I'm going to start researching Benjamin Franklin. And I'm so glad I did, because he is truly the founding father. Everybody talks about the founding fathers, plural, but if I had to say that there is one who is more important than all the rest, it's Benjamin Franklin. He was the oldest. He was born in 1706 in Boston and left when he was 17 years old. He ran away from home and landed in Philadelphia, and he called Philadelphia his home for the rest of his life. But he probably only spent half of his life in Philadelphia. He was an ambassador to both England and to France, representing the colonies at that time. And then he became the ambassador to France. He was our first ambassador. When he had signed the Declaration of Independence, he was 70 years old. He went across the Atlantic for the 4th time in his life. And at that point in time, he thought, I may not come back. His wife had passed away. He's 70 years old. He's got 2 young grandsons with him. One is 16 and one is 7. And he goes over, and in my mind, in 1776, when he lands in France, the entire revolution and whether or not we were going to become a nation was at stake. And his efforts with the French court made sure that we had the money and the resources to fight the war. And without his masterful skills as an ambassador, we were able to get the money, the men, the weapons that we needed to fight the British. And at Yorktown, in the decisive battle, most people don't recognize that half the troops at Yorktown were French soldiers, and that the French fleet had blockaded Chesapeake Bay and did not allow the British fleet to come in and rescue Cornwallis. Without the French, we would not be a free country, and we would not have become the United States of America. The Declaration of Independence, which we have a copy of over here, laid out the founding ideals for the country. But unless we were able to win our independence and win the battles that we had in the Revolution, this would have been a meaningless document.
Well, I'm going to stop you right then. And I know you're very, very familiar with it, and I'm pretty familiar with it. Some of our listeners may not be. They may not know what time period we're talking about. Ben Franklin was born in 1706 and lived, and you said passed away.
He passed away in 1790.
90. So in his later years of his life, he was very, very important to the founding of the colonies that had come over from Europe and developed into the United States of America by a lot of his guidance and a lot of his knowledge and a lot of his diplomatic knowledge and being able in diplomacy to be able to go over and negotiate. Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that we were fighting, I believe, King George because of high taxations and other things, other reasons of the United Kingdom. And France had not really been the best of friends of the United Kingdom for many, many, many years. Although a lot of the kings were cousins. I know Louis XIV's cousin was, I think, not Henry VIII, but in Henry VIII's family. I think he was the last of the Tudors family. And I think and Windsor Castle was actually built as a design off of King Louis XIV's Versailles and palaces. And so there was a lot of close relationship between the two, but they weren't really great friends. And when the United States started, or not the United States, the colonies started fighting the Revolutionary War against the United Kingdom, France was on our side, and a lot of their generals and leaders and Navy, as you mentioned, all came and supported us. Yes. And they were very important in helping the United States become the United States. And I understand when they blew up some of the British ships and they started burning, the Americans came up with the term French fry. That's not true. That's not true because of, anyway. Please tell us a little bit more about his early life, how he got into the politics and all that. And he wasn't just a politician or he was an unbelievable designer, engineer. He had many, many patents. I think if I'm not wrong, he invented the printing press and was a publisher and a printer. And I think the most fantastic thing I ever thought about him is, we all know that the symbol of the United States is the bald eagle. He didn't want the bald eagle. He wanted the
wild turkey.
Wild turkey. And I think, hey, you know, that was a much more prevalent bird in the East Coast of the United States back then. And I don't know when the bald eagle became, but I'm sure it was way after he passed away. Yeah. I might be wrong, but
well,
please tell us a little bit of the history and go back, please. Thank you.
He was born in 1706. His father had emigrated from England, and he had 7 children with his first wife. His first wife, Anne, died in childbirth. And then he turned around right away and married Ben's mother. Ben is the 7th or the 8th, I guess, of her children. So Ben Franklin ends up being the 15th of Josiah Franklin's 17 children by 2 wives.
There wasn't any TV or internet or anything back then.
There wasn't anything like that. They entertained
themselves. A lot of cold winter nights up in the east.
They worked all the time because there was no leisure time. You had to
produce that kind of food for that many kids.
That's right. And he went to work for his father. He had no formal schooling to speak of. He had a 1st and 2nd grade when he was 8, but his father had talked about making him a preacher and sending him off to Harvard College to become a Puritan minister. But he was a rowdy young man, and the minister was not something that he was going to fit into easily. And so his father took him and made him an apprentice in his candle shop. And so I have a candle here to represent that earliest part of his life, because that's what he did. He dipped the wicks and helped administer the making of the candles. And as Ben would tell you, it was a foul-smelling business, because when they were rendering the animal hides and so forth to make the candle,
to make paraffin,
they had to deal with these decaying animal carcasses, and that's not a pleasant thing.
For our
But he
younger
knew.
listeners, there hadn't always been electricity.
No, there was.
You know, there wasn't, you know, go flip on this, that, you know, you had to have candles at night.
Yep.
Or a fire.
Yep.
That was the only light you had.
That was.
And heat.
In Boston and Philadelphia, being as far north as they are, those winter nights are very, very long.
Yes.
And they have to have candles everywhere, so it was a necessity. But Ben's father was smart enough to realize that he was not going to be happy being a candle maker. He was too bright, he was too ambitious. Ben actually wanted to go to sea, but his father forbade it because his eldest son had gone to sea and not returned.
Oh.
So we weren't going to have any more seamen in the family going off and not returning anytime soon. So Ben's brother had become a printer, and he thought, okay, I'm going to have to work in a new business, and he became a printer. He didn't invent the printing press, but he mastered the art of printing, and he mastered the art of writing. He was an incredible writer and was very diligent. He started his first writing posing as a woman and writing about how the town's fathers, the Puritans, were really not that nice of human beings. And he caused some trouble during that time. And his brother actually was arrested. And he was the owner of the newspaper, and the Puritan fathers, Cotton Mather and others, thought that this kind of a free thinker had no place in their society in Boston. And so Ben, seeing that, he ran away from home. And because he was an apprentice printer, when he arrived in Philadelphia, he was able to get work because he had a job skill. Mm-hmm. He was ambitious. He only had 3 coins in his pocket. To get to Philadelphia, he had walked across New Jersey.
Wow.
The 75 miles between Perth Amboy and Burlington, and arrived there at Burlington and then floated down the river with some strangers. He didn't know a soul. But as he walked up Market Street the first day in October when he was there, he saw a young woman, and she saw him. He was 17, she was probably 15, and they became rather close. Her name was Deborah Reed, and they developed a close relationship. But Ben then was given the chance to go to England to further his skills as a printer, and he had to leave, and so Mrs. Reed put an end to their courtship. Ben went. He learned a thing or two about the world on his first voyage over there as a young man. And when he came back, he was surprised to find that Deborah had taken another husband, the local potter. And he did not treat Deborah very well, and he'd run off, actually. And in 1730, once he was established in business, he was 24 by that point in time, he asked Deborah to be his wife, and he took her as his common-law wife on September 1st. An interesting fact is that Ben had fathered a child out of wedlock. We don't know who the mother was.
Was it in England or was it in the United States?
It was in the United States. And so, as a condition of their marriage, Deborah had to say that she would go ahead and raise the child, whose name was William. And William becomes a very important person in the story of Benjamin Franklin, as does Deborah. Deborah was a perfect wife for Ben Franklin. She was very loyal. She helped him in his shop, helped him in his business. She was not well educated, but she was very, very loyal to him and he to her.
Is it R-E-E-D?
R-E-A-D.
Okay, because my grandmother's name was Ola, Anola Reed.
Yeah.
I thought, hey, we might be related. I need to go to Salt Lake City and find out.
Right.
Well, I know his son was very, very important and played a role in his life. and helped his father a lot. But he had some other children, did he?
He had two other children. He and Deborah had a young son named Frankie. And of course, in those days, smallpox was a great epidemic killer. It's nothing like the pandemic we have been through with COVID at all. It attacked people of all ages. It attacked people of all races. And Frankie came down with smallpox and died when he was 4 years old.
Oh, that's a shame.
And then a couple of years later, they had a daughter who they named Sarah, but they called her Sally. And the only direct lineage from Ben Franklin comes through Sally's family line. William Franklin, the oldest child, never had a child who survived into adulthood and passed down the Franklin name. She ended up marrying a man named Richard Bache, and so everyone who comes up through the Ben Franklin direct descendants came from Sally and Richard Bache.
We have some other objects here besides the Constitution. Is this Declaration of Independence?
This is the Declaration, and this is the Constitution.
And you have some other things. Is that representing a beaver pelt?
It's actually representing a marten hat.
Okay, it's a hat, but it was probably made out of beaver felt.
And Franklin wore this when he first got to France, because at the age of 70, he was rather sickly. He was covered in boils from head to foot. And to make himself less objectionable to the people in France, he put on this hat for his voyage, and then he covered his head this way. All of the women in France thought, oh, this Franklin, he is quite the man. And they started doing their hair in a style that was similar to what Franklin did, the Franklin coif.
Well, speaking of hair, he always had long hair, I think. Most of the pictures I've ever seen of him, he had hair like mine. I have it because I'm Native American, but he had it because
that was what he liked to do. He did not favor wigs at all. He let his hair grow, and like me, he fought his bald head from time to time and let his hair go and so forth. And one of the reasons I picked Franklin for my character is that I had resembled him. He lived to be 84. That's a long time gig.
Oh, in that time of, yes.
And so I can continue to do Franklin as I'm only 74.
You got another 10 years of this gig.
At least that long. And also fat, like he was, and bald, like he was. But I needed the help of the Broadway Wig Company in New York to come up with a wig that I could wear. And if your viewers are interested in seeing what I look like in costume, there are a couple of YouTube presentations.
And please give out that link, because I want everybody to be able to go on. I have actually seen you dressed as Mr. Franklin, and when he gets into that persona, he's no longer Stephen. He is Ben Franklin. And I asked him a question off camera, kind of, sort of, when he was through with this presentation, and he wouldn't answer it as Stephen. He answered it as Ben Franklin. He said, Ben Franklin wasn't alive. He had already died when that happened, so I can't answer your question.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that. But give the website or the links to where our listening audience can go to and see you in your costume and hear your presentations. And hopefully, someday in the future, you'll be here in Chapala or somewhere to be able to see Stephen put on his presentation. Do you do it in other parts of the country? Do you go back to the States and do it also?
I haven't gone back to the States recently to do this, but I have done 3 programs at Open Circle.
Okay.
And if your viewers would like, they can simply search on YouTube for Open Circle Ben Franklin.
Perfect.
And all three of those presentations, each of which run about 40 minutes, are on tape, and they can see that. Also, about 6 or 7 years ago, I was interviewed by a newspaper in my native Oregon, and they wanted to know how I became Ben Franklin. And so there's a little 3-minute clip that shows me getting dressed in my regalia from head to toe.
Well, not only does he wear a wig and a hat, but he has clothes that I don't know where you had them made, but they're very period time piece. I mean, they look exactly like if you looked at a picture of Ben Franklin in the history books. Did you have those special made or custom made?
I've
You
had,
to.
I basically took a suit from a friend of mine who was about my size, and it was made of blue velvet to start my costuming. And I altered that suit and found online some puffy shirts that are replicas of the era. I found some shoes that were from Mexico, actually, that were similar to the colonial style shoes, and leggings that I found in Williamsburg, Virginia. Yes. And so,
Which is one of the places where our country was founded, Williamsburg, Fredericksburg. My mother's from Suffolk, Virginia, and you mentioned Washington, D.C. I had an uncle who was a retired 2-star Air Force general that lived in Falls Church for many, many years, and retired out of the Pentagon, and he's now buried, laid to rest in Arlington, him and his, my aunt. And so I'm very familiar with the area. My brother had his PhD in history and was a teacher. He was also a former Air Force colonel. He was a very amazing man, died at 64, very, very young. But please, go to the websites, look up Stephen's presentations, and watch them. You'll not only be entertained, but you'll learn a lot. I mean, it's like reading a history book that is true, very factual, and it's portrayed, and the information you give is probably things that you've learned over your professional time and your dedication and studying him, that you probably can't find out a lot of that information anywhere else.
well,
What you present.
I try to pull it together. I've written a one-man play that I've presented a few times that takes his whole life into consideration. I'd like to leave your listeners with two things that Ben Franklin did. He was a master inventor and a master discoverer. He was a scientist as well as a printer and a newspaper man and so forth. And he was very interested in the study of electricity. This was the dawning of the electrical age. For years, people thought that when there was lightning in the sky, it was because we had made the gods angry. And in fact, so many buildings burned to the ground after being struck by lightning. It was a major source of economic loss in the colonies. And Franklin went out and proved one day by flying a kite in a thunderstorm that was wet, that electrical fluid, as they called it in those days, actually came from the lightning, and that was similar to what they had been able to produce in the laboratory. When you see pictures of Ben Franklin doing this experiment, there's a lad out there with him. Mm-hmm. That's his son, William.
That's his son.
And he's always depicted as a lad, although he was 21 years old when they did the experiment. It's a better story to say that's his son.
Well, also he had the kite. I remember from pictures they had a key. Mm-hmm. Now is that because it's metal?
Yeah.
And that's what conducted the metal?
That's exactly
the lightning,
right.
and then it would probably go into the ground?
Well, yes, or into him, because he stuck out his knuckle and it went from the key to his knuckle and so forth. But from that experiment, he invented the lightning rod, which saved more buildings.
Oh, probably, yeah. And still does today.
And still does today in terms of neutralizing lightning. And we owe that to him. The other thing he did that older folks are most appreciative of is that he designed and built what he called double spectacles. And those are, for older people, the ability to see far from the upper lens and a lower lens that he put in, and you can see, Michael, here, the line that now...
We call them bifocals.
And
today,
they
and
are
he
called
invented those.
bifocals now, but he called them double spectacles. And he invented those, and old people now are most thankful for that.
Well, he invented lots of things.
He did.
And to learn more about his life and the impact he had on helping the United States become the United States with his diplomatic endeavors that he did in France and also the United Kingdom, and everything he did in Philadelphia, New York, in the early histories of this country, and then later life, because as you mentioned, he was into his 80s, but the United States had been founded in these documents signed in 1776, but he lived for what, how many years later? 10 years?
From 1776 onward, he lived for 16 more years.
16 more years.
The Constitution was written in 1787.
Okay.
So he was the elder statesman there and lived for 3 more years.
And he's got a signature on these documents.
He's
hasn't
got signatures on both of these documents and on the Treaty of Paris, which gave us our freedom from Great Britain. He is the only person, the only founder to have his signature on the Constitution, the Treaty of Paris, and the Declaration of Independence. I will say that when he left the Philadelphia Independence Hall, as we call it today, and they asked him, as his neighbor, Mrs. Powell, said, "Dr. Franklin, what kind of government have you given us?" And he said, "A republic, madam, if you can keep it."
And that's what we've been fighting for ever since 1776.
That's exactly right.
Well, Stephen, I want to say thank you very much. We've run out of time for today's presentation, but I would really like to have you maybe back on another show in costume. And if you wouldn't mind, give a little bit of your presentation, and we can put it, like I said, through the University of Guadalajara, and maybe some of those younger students can learn a little bit more about Benjamin Franklin and a little bit more about yourself.
And those who are here in the Lakeside area, I will be performing Ben Franklin at Open Circle on January 15th. And I will be doing France.
Fabulous. Well, I'll be there.
Franklin's time in France. So,
I'll come be there, and I thank anybody in the Lakeside area, all the expats, and we'll have a lot of snowbirds down here.
Yep.
At that time. So again, Stephen, thank you very, very much for your time. We appreciate it, and we'll welcome you back anytime.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, sir.
Been my pleasure.
Let's go close out another episode of Expat Conversations with Michael Nolen through the University of Guadalajara Institute of Innovation, Investigation, and Governance. Thank you very much for tuning in.
Happy trail.